Welcome to the first Compassionate Leadership in Finance podcast. We're excited to share leadership stories through Mindful on Wall Street. My name is Annemiek van der Werf, and with me today is Sander Tiedemann, and together we lead the Compassionate Leadership in Finance program at the Garrison Institute. You can learn more about our program in the show notes for this podcast. We're joined today by our guest, Howard Fischer. Howard leads Gratitude Railroad and is the chairman emeritus of Basso Capital. In this and our next podcasts, we will share stories of compassionate leaders in finance and how they apply mindfulness in their day-to-day life. Let me pass the mic to Sander and let's get started.
Thank you, Annemiek, and hello, Howard. Nice to see you.
Great to see you.
It's a pleasure to have this time with you to really explore your vision towards leadership in the financial sector. And as you know, Cliff, Compassionate Leadership in Finance initiative, which started about 2 years ago, is based on this vision that the world is facing enormous challenges and that are really impacting the world of business, the world of finance. And there might be a tendency to leave that to governments and politicians to solve, but we believe that it's also up to the business and particularly the financial sector to change its response to those challenges. And that's a function of leadership. So we are advocating a new type of leadership that is, maybe based on principles like compassion and wisdom. And it's really quite different from what we are seeing right now. So we'd love to explore with you how you see that shift, the challenges that are coming, what particularly the finance industry can do in order to respond more effectively with better long-term outcomes, and both for the industry itself, but also for society and for environment. So maybe you can talk a little bit about your vision, seeing the changes that are happening and the challenges that are coming.
Yeah. Thank you, Sander and Annemiek. I would start by saying, a way of introducing people to the concepts that we're talking about and how I've incorporated the lessons of Cliff in my life. My journey into this world of compassion and presence and impact investing began when I went back to school in 2013, amidst a career as a hedge fund manager and having been deeply impacted emotionally, spiritually, and of course, financially by the financial crisis in 2008. And as I recently reflected on those experiences, I gave a presentation to a group of MBA graduates that I called From Gordon Gekko to the Dalai Lama. And that's the work that I've been trying to evolve, and that Cliff really helped me reach a new level with. The idea that we can be smart, passionate, hardworking, profit-seeking business people, but in everything that we do, the way that we live, the way we act, the way we treat all of our stakeholders, our employees, our customers, our partners, our community, our environment, can be managed successfully with compassion for all of those in mind.
Wonderful. I love that, from Gordon Gekko to the Dalai Lama. But you will agree that there's kind of a big stretch from, let's say, the greed is good culture that has characterized Wall Street and finance in general over the last few decades, right? So it's a big shift. So how do you see us overcoming those old leadership styles and patterns, and cultivate this more compassionate, more caring type of culture?
Yeah, it's a big challenge. There's no doubt about it. I actually have sympathy for those people at a high level of success in the financial services industry in particular, who can't seem to get out of that stereotypical or hackneyed treadmill of I need more, I need more, I need more. Most of them are good people at heart. Most of them are caring, they're philanthropic, they have families that they love. But they're trapped in this vision of themselves and the image and the need for more. Unfortunately, often the transition that I experience in those who are on this journey with me deeply is triggered by some traumatic event. For many, it was being downtown in 9/11. For many like me, it was the 2008 financial crisis. Whether it's a health issue or some kind of personal issue like a divorce. So the real goal to me is how to get people to recognize how good this feels. And for me, it's usually about one-on-one conversations, inviting people to the events at Cliff, at Garrison, or the work that we do at Gratitude Railroad. But it's an invitation, and it's a way of making it a safe place. I have been in contact with people who I call secret meditators. They have a spiritual practice that's important to them, but they leave it at home. They don't want to share it with the world. They feel it will reduce their respect. And I think one of the most important things that Cliff brings to that community of human beings is that knowledge that others feel the same way, that others can share in this journey and be supportive as they open it up. And I'll just say one more thing. I was recently speaking to one of my former employees. I closed my hedge fund business at the end of last year. And often I share the book of joy with people who are going through a transition phase in their lives. So I shared it with him, and he read it with great resonance and said he really noticed a change in me from the time that I began on that journey. And I've been on the journey for a long time, but it certainly began very deeply in 2013 when we went back to school, continued through to 2020, was it, when I did the Cliff program, 2021. And he noticed in me the change in me and how that affected the way that I ran the business and treated my employees. And I think that this is something that everybody could find resonant, comforting, and joyful.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you, Hart. You're saying so many things. There's so many things I'd like to explore with you. And, with Cliff, we have this concept of self-compassion and then other compassion. And then the third level is systems compassion, right? So you talk about a little bit about, your personal experience of how good it feels and creating a safe space. And I'd like to continue that. But first, can you say also a couple of things about the systems compassion? Because that was kind of implicit in your first answer. Why this is now needed, right? Why do you think this is in the whole sector necessary, and why is it also of benefit to the sector itself? And then I'd love to go deeper with you on the other points on your personal, the personal compassion.
Sure. Obviously that's the core, and it's complicated, but I think there are very few of us, certainly those who are comfortable listening to this call and participating in mindfulness on Wall Street, that the world is a troubled place. We have tremendous environmental issues. We have active, omnipresent racism issues. We have complicated political states in many countries on an ongoing basis. We have, certainly right now, at the time of this call, fear and disruption in the economic markets in which we act. And fighting all that and the state of just thinking about oneself and greed and competitiveness is not a natural state. It's not a healthy state. If we could all begin to work together collectively to share more emotionally and spiritually, it can transform a firm. It's been well proven in the work of groups like Conscious Capitalism and B Labs that companies that lead with those kinds of values have lower turnover, have more productive employees, and get more done and have better relationships with their clients. So not only is this emotionally and spiritually rewarding for the entire team, it's economically rewarding, but it starts at the top. So if the leader of the firm can bring that to everybody there and free them to operate with compassion and mindfulness, it will reverberate throughout the world in the system in which we operate.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And you're saying it's some more natural state in which there will be more value created for everybody involved, and it leads to more business value as well, right? That's what you're saying. That's what we believe too. Yeah, good. Now, and then of course, going back to the other points, I mean, we'd love to hear from you as a leader yourself, how you have gone through this journey. What challenges did you have to overcome, and how did you do that? Because I can't imagine it was always a good place to be in, right? Like how do you go through those transitions of fear and anxiety and all that sort of thing that come with leadership in a very complex, dynamic environment, to a place of sharing and caring, safe place. It sounds easy, and we all want it, but it's we'd love to hear from you how you're doing that.
It's funny. It does sound easy, and it should feel natural, but especially in the financial services world, where there's so much volatility in the state of a company. The first disaster I faced was the crisis. Now I don't even remember, what was it, 1987? I find that was when we had the big crash, 2000.
.com bubble or Asia crisis, yeah.
So I see all these crises, and you have to make changes. I think the most important part about this is openness, authenticity, and honesty. And I think that by continuing to get comfortable with sharing how I'm feeling, that creates a comfort in the people that I worked with. It's hard to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
There's this idea that you're the leader of a firm and you have to have a certain image. And I think one of the most important pieces of work that relate to my comfort with that, for many of us in this financial services field, we all want to do better. We want to have more AUM. We want to have higher returns. We want to, be the biggest of something. And that's all driven by this desire to look better than the other. And the humility and the humbleness that comes with thinking with a compassionate mind rather than an ego mind brings that out. And once you walk away from that, you can manage in a way that's much more respectful of your employees. So rather than excoriating them and punishing them when things go awry, you discuss it in a more reasonable manner. We all know of, the legendary hedge funds where, you say the wrong thing, the slip of the tongue and you're out, right? You watch the TV show Billions, and, it's really an incredibly unpleasant environment, which may strike true in many places. And personally, I want to find the people like that. I want to give them a hug. I want to take them on a walk and then bring them to Garrison Institute to learn that they don't have to live that way.
Yeah, good. Well, let's hope that happens. But how did that happen for you? What was the moment that when you were you found a switch to turn your mind around and your heart opened up?
A moment, certainly the financial crisis in 2008 was a major trigger of a change in me. I remember where I was and what I was doing when it became clear that Lehman was failing and the world was going to change dramatically. And literally overnight, I lost half my net worth. My firm lost half it lost because of valuations, half its value. Ultimately, the firm shrank by 90%. I had to lay off 80% of my employees. And I began to deal with that and began to recognize that roller coaster, let's call it a roller coaster, or even that escalator I was on, more and more money, more and more people, more and more assets, was no more. And I got comfortable with that. But it wasn't easy. It took a long time. I can't tell you that if I was offered the opportunity to go to Cliff in January of 2009, I probably wouldn't have been ready. It takes some readiness. But I think, as you said at the beginning, Sander, the world is changing. There is a lot more recognition of the place of mindfulness and compassion and meditation and caring for others. That whether you want to talk about it from the controversy of ESG to impact investing, it's much more commonplace. People understand that self-care is important. But the real trigger was that loss of wealth, power, control, and that imposition of uncertainty and confusion and depression from that 2008 financial crisis that began me on this journey. That Cliff was really a capstone at this point in time for it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Can you say a little bit more about what, how compassion is helping yourself? What is the benefit for you? Somehow, yeah, you alluded to that. It gives a good feeling somehow, but how does that work? Can you explain? Because we often, we think compassion is something you do for others, right? And it is a kind of some sort of self-sacrifice. You pay attention to the interests of somebody else, but you say this is something that benefits you as well, right? So, I mean, we agree, right? But I'd love to hear how does it work for you?
Those are probably better questions for the Buddha and the Dalai Lama. But once you have self-compassion and you accept who you are, and you understand there will be ups and downs in life, and you don't have to be this perfect human being, and that it is what it is, it brings a calmness and a peace into yourself. And you look at people differently. You don't see them, especially again in that world of, back to billionaires, where each hedge fund manager is trying to defeat the other. You don't look at people as enemies. You look at them as partners and friends. And while you can be competitive, it's not like you can't do good business and you can't try really, really hard. You lose the anger. I think the anger is one of the most important emotions that we all need to manage better, that and jealousy, right? And by having compassion for others and taking and being happy for others' success. Right? I think the way, if I've been saying this, and I don't know if this is a perfect example and how true it is, but one of the last things that I believe that I have come to is accept with comfort and a lack of emotion that others have been more successful than I have, doing the same things and following the same path. And I am where I am in life, and I have lots to be grateful for, and others have other paths, and they have lots to be grateful on their own, and then that's perfect. Once you accept you for who you are, you can be respectful for what others do. And once you lose that jealousy, especially, you can move forward.
Right. So jealousy and anger, these kind of seems like toxic, parts, right, of your mind that just sort of make you feel uncomfortable.
Right.
And
it makes you do irrational things. It makes you do mean things. It makes you do things that are, to quote somebody who recently said this publicly, retribution, right? Retribution is a function of anger and jealousy. It doesn't serve anybody. If you're wasting energy on anger and jealousy and retribution, you're not putting that energy to good work. If you focus on what you do it every day and be good to people, also, we can talk about karma, right? Sowing the seeds of the future. When you do bad things, that bad will return. In some way to confront you. If you do good things, and over the last 10, 11 years, as I've been deeply in this work, so much of that good has come back. I don't do the good for the return, but it's amazing to me how it comes back. And I don't need it to come back. Putting good out in the world and making people happy and helping them get jobs or helping them deal with trauma, it's a beautiful thing. And that feeds me and allows me to continue to grow and evolve as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Annemiek, please come in. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, Howard, you said, to have joy for other successes. What does that do to people when you actually do that? What is your experience with that?
There are people who are on this journey for whom they see that and appreciate it and have gratitude for it. And then I think there are others who don't understand it. It's like, why? Why would you do that? I recently, without giving away too many details, visited with somebody who was a political prisoner, maybe 40 or 50 years ago. And shortly after he left prison, he was in a position to meet one of his jailers, one of his torturers, actually. And this is a political diplomatic role. And in a split second, as he ran into this person who literally tortured him, he tried to decide, do I need to be angry? Do I need to be combative? Or should I work towards unification and settlement? And he took the man out to dinner and worked on making amends between the two of them and giving him. And That's pretty high level stuff. That's pretty amazing.
Yes.
And,
For
I
sure.
don't know if I could do that.
Mhm.
That certainly is much closer to the Dalai Lama than I certainly am at this point in time, and maybe never will be. But to see that living, right? It's great to read about it in books and, to read even the Dalai Lama's forgiveness of everything that's happened to him. But I aspire to be that way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, can you say, I mean, now we're on this point, because this seems like advanced practice, right? To forgive your enemy or forgive your torturer. I mean, that must be extremely difficult to do. I think most common people are not, are kind of at a lower level, and we suffer from these negative emotions that you mentioned. And also, I think these days with so much anxiety and worry, that seem innocent in a way, right? But you can see that we spend wasting a lot of time on that. But can you say what, let's say, ordinary people could do in terms of
Sure.
practice? How
Sure.
what's been your experience of sort of day-to-day practice?
Yeah.
Of,
So
you
there are
mentioned
a few
mindfulness.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. There are a few things. One is simply meditating, right? I find
Mhm.
that certainly is centering and calming. Um, it helps, right? We all go throughout the day, have something that causes tension or distress. And this is sort of also happening, right? Wait a beat before you respond. Personally, right now, my practice is when something is disturbing to me, typically it's through email and there's a response. And my emotional response is, all caps and short. And I never send that right away. I sleep on
Mhm.
it and I wait. And I think, the reading that relates to the work, whatever book, again, the Book of Joy has been instrumental for me, and so many others. I'm not the only person who's a big fan of the book, but literally I've shared it dozens of times. And for many people similar to me, it has created lifelong lessons that they remember. And it's that, one story that always stands out for people in that book is they're driving. I think Desmond Tutu was driving, and somebody cuts them off, and he laughs. Where most people would be angry and honk their horns. And he made some remark, I guess, about that person needing to be someplace more important than where I need to be. So let them be. And to think about that in every incident in life, right? You're in a restaurant. We were at a restaurant the other night, and 3 of the 4 dishes we ordered came in wrong. Some people would be very upset. They call for the manager. They demand a free meal, and the 4 of us were, all sort of, understanding, compassionate people, and we didn't make a big deal about it. We talked calmly to the waiter and had our meals remade and gave him a big tip because it was his first night and he was very stressed.
Mhm.
So I think it's that stepping back and thinking about being in the other person's shoes. That's
Mhm.
why are they doing that? How are they doing that? What has brought them to that place? Is it a trauma? Is it a distress? Is there something going on at home? Are they not feeling well? Rather than they did that to me, therefore.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's the kind of thing that I try to practice. I'm not always
Yeah.
successful, but I think about
Yeah.
it.
So it seems some sort of mindfulness practice, right? And that calms your mind, but also some analysis of, how, the choices that you have and the impact it has on others, and sort of the cause and effect chain that you seem to do both, right? So balancing, calming your mind, and reflecting on the
Mhm.
impact of others. And
That's
right.
correct.
Yeah. Okay. Good. 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 Would that be true for everyone? Is there something you would recommend people particularly in the financial sector, right? Because we believe that there's certain circumstances in this volatile marketplace, um, with lots of pressure, and focus on financial results, which seems so far away from the emotional world somehow, right? So, would you say would you subscribe the same method or practice to for everyone, or
Oh,
and
yeah.
Annemiek, come in. I mean, I'd love to, Annemiek, you
Listen,
have your own practice
there,
and experience. Maybe
Mhm.
the feminine, maybe there is a feminine way to doing this, less analytical. I don't know. Maybe there are different ways of that are suitable for different people.
Well, let's Howard go first.
Good, good.
Yeah.
look, right. For not everybody thinks, first, a lot of people don't think they can meditate or they think they're bad at it. I think nature is important too, right?
Hmm.
Being out in nature and understanding the beauty of the world and what's been created for us to enjoy. I think it is that stepping back and not succumbing to your first, usually emotional, knee-jerk, combative reaction. Think a little bit, take a breath, understand. I do think it's hard, which is again why something like the practices of Cliff and the lessons of mindfulness on Wall Street are important, and why we need to do this work every day. And we're going to lapse, and we're going to learn, and we're going to grow. It's hard, but it's, the world that we live in. Most times you sit on a trading floor, or you're in an investment banking group, and you're working 80 hours a week. It's really, really hard. But you need to just step back and breathe and think about others, and think about how it makes you feel when you get angry, right? The jealousy, how does that make you feel? Obviously, people have hard lives, they have challenges, they have sadnesses, they have complications. But overall, just be grateful for being alive, and understanding that you have the opportunity to do more. And what you do is what you do. We're not all going to be, I don't know, Gordon Gekko, or we're all not going to be as successful as Jamie Dimon, right? Or all those Larry Fink, right? Okay, but so what? Are they happy? Happiness is the most important factor, right? More money does not bring happiness. More things bring more complexity and more challenge. And so maybe the idea is to think about being satisfied without giving up, but being satisfied and accepting, and seeking that balance that makes you feel better.
Yeah. Well, I think, when I listen to you and the question that you let's say posed, Sander, I would say it's interesting how when I started meditation, I started it really for myself, my own personal well-being. And it grows on you, right? Or at least it grew on me, right? So it grew from personal meditation to being more in tune with others and be more mindful of how I responded to other people. Simple things like suddenly I was no longer irritated when I was in the wrong line in the supermarket. And this sounds maybe crazy, but it's like this sudden realization of, there's something that is growing on me that feels good. And that grows into, or grew into, wanting to see the bigger picture and how I could become part of a bigger picture. And so I think that's what meditation does. There's a lot of people that would say, well, I don't have time for it. And my question is sometimes, do you brush your teeth every day? And you probably do. So maybe start with 5 minutes of meditation, and don't get angry with yourself if it doesn't work immediately, right? Take your time and do it again. Go back to your breath and do it again. But I think the other thing you said that I think is very important is reflection. And with that, I think comes be more compassionate in listening to other people, right? To be present, be there. And so when you have this moment where you know that you're going into an office or into a meeting where things are going to be tough and difficult and irritable, just, sit down and take a deep breath and listen, observe, and reflect before you respond. I think that makes a big, big difference.
I love the supermarket line. That's so perfect. It's like Desmond Tutu getting cut off on traffic. You're so right. Pick the right line, and oh my God, there's a shopping cart or two that moves faster than you.
Yeah. Why doesn't he
2
pick
minutes.
it up a bit quicker?
Check your watch. How much time is it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then
So,
maybe
Sander,
a question,
I think
both of you.
We need to try to bring it to a close. I think so. Sander, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but what's on top of your mind to say or ask before we, round off the conversation?
Well, the last question that relates also to Cliff. I mean, because we're talking here, there will be people listening who are working in big financial institutions. You can take it up as a personal practice. I think that is the key here that we have been discussing. But there is also something on an institutional level that can be done. Either in leadership development, HR, talent development. I don't know, ESG, DEI. There's so many leverage points, but I'd love to hear just from both of you very quickly, how can a financial institution, learn and install these type of practices and create this culture of compassion within?
I think it's more you, Annemiek. I never worked in it, not for decades have I worked at a very large firm. So again, to me, the way I envision Cliff, right, compassionate leaders, right, with a capital L. If the leadership of the firm make it clear that they do this, that they share, it's like you guys know I'm sort of active on LinkedIn, and I'll often share something in my daily reading that's inspiring that has nothing to do with business. If the leader of the firm helps lead or convenes group meditation, right, or brings in a speaker like the amazing speakers that the Garrison Institute brings in, and just shares it and changes just the atmosphere around this, not in a forceful way. Here's a class and people go to the class to get a check mark and to show they were there, but try to invite people in an open way, a voluntary way, and just slowly change that culture through daily action or weekly action.
Yeah.
Authentically.
Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely right. But I would also say that it doesn't stop you as a person to just get started. At MUFG, we didn't wait for the CEO to say, well, I think we need this. It started with a small group of people that started, meditating or bringing mindful meditation to a small group of people. And that grew and grew and grew. And I think, Sander, that may be a good segue into what to talk about in our next podcast, to dig into that a little bit deeper and see what we can explore further. But I would say it's like what we discussed earlier. Compassion starts with yourself, and so in that you can include other people that are of like mind and that want to grow with you. And it's very infectious, like you said. Joy brings success. Joy brings not just to yourself, but to other people. And so it becomes a very inclusive process. And it's very hard to stop it. Once it kicks off, it really is hard to stop it. And so at MUFG, for instance, it's now part of the credit analyst program. So there is something happening where not just CHROs, but I think the C-suite but also at large in organizations, people are starting to recognize that there's a need for a greater sense of belonging in organizations. And part of that comes from being better at describing what the purpose is of the organization and the role you play in it. But it's also how you bring your own personal practice to work as being a leader. And I believe in leaders at all levels. So any of you listening, whatever your position is, you can have an impact. That's how I look at it.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Annemiek and Howard, for your wisdom, your experience.
You too.
And I think we can continue in our next podcast on. I mean, there's so many different avenues we can take from here. But thank you for your inspiration, Howard.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard.